Welcome to this explainer. We usually think of democracy as just voting booths, campaigns, and legal documents. But honestly, underneath all that lies a massive, invisible engine driving almost every decision: human identity. Today, we're unpacking the fascinating and sometimes pretty volatile intersection of deeply rooted social identities and democratic politics. And this brings us to a massive, overarching question right at the heart of our source material. Do deep societal divisions act as a destructive force that tears nations apart, or do they actually function as a vital tool for empowerment? As you'll see, the answer is a really complex puzzle. Let's quickly map out what we'll be covering. We're going to look at social diversity itself, dive into the gender divide, explore what happens when religion meets politics, unpack India's unique caste system, and finally, weigh the overall impact on democracy. All right, let's jump right into Section 1, Social Diversity in Democracy, and why it acts as a double-edged sword. Moving right along to our first major pillar, Section 2, Gender, specifically where the private meets the public, and this idea of the sexual division of labor. So, this all starts with a deeply ingrained societal expectation. Society kind of dictates that men belong out there in the public arena, focusing on careers and public life, while women are traditionally confined to the private sphere, expected to take responsibility for housework and raising kids. This creates a really entrenched sexual division of labor right from childhood. And the source material points out that despite all our modern progress, many societies, including India, are still fundamentally structured by patriarchy. The word literally translates to rule by father. It's basically a system that inherently values men more and systematically grants them power over women. Now, how does this actually look in the real world? Well, it translates into some pretty stark everyday realities. Take this staggering fact from the text. On average, an Indian woman does at least 1 extra hour of completely unvalued, unpaid work every single day compared to a man. When you combine that extra burden with significantly lower literacy rates and a societal preference for having male children, the daily impact of this divide is just undeniable. And here's the thing. This private marginalization leads to a huge public consequence. Since women are largely relegated to the private sphere, they are missing from the actual halls of power. For instance, in India, women make up less than 15% of the Lok Sabha legislature. Think about that. When half the population isn't even in the room, their specific needs simply aren't going to get met. But the beauty of democracy is that it provides a mechanism to push back. Feminist movements have been actively fighting this, demanding real equality and representation. And because of this massive pressure, the law now mandates a very tangible democratic solution. Exactly 1/3 of all local government seats in panchayats and municipalities are legally reserved for women. Ultimately, these big political battles trickle down into deeply personal areas, specifically what we call family laws. These are the legal codes that govern things like marriage, divorce, and inheritance. Reforming these laws is absolutely crucial for achieving genuine equality, not just in public office, but right inside our own homes. Okay, let's transition to our second pillar, Section 3, Religion, Communalism, and Politics. This explores exactly what happens when belief steps into the political arena. While gender divides are often sort of hidden away in the private sphere, religious differences are highly visible and frankly frequently weaponized. The source material defines this as communalism. It happens when religion is injected directly into politics to falsely present one group as superior to the others. It's a really flawed idea because it assumes that all followers of one religion share the exact same political interests, basically reducing incredibly diverse individuals into a single-minded voting bloc. Let's look at how this weaponization actually escalates, because it rarely starts with a bang. It builds over time. It begins quietly, with everyday beliefs and religious stereotypes. But from there, it can escalate into a quest for political dominance by one community. Politicians start mobilizing voters using sacred symbols and highly emotional appeals. And tragically, as the text outlines, this can ignite that final, devastating stage: communal violence and riots. So how do you immunize a democracy against this kind of toxic escalation? Well, the framers of the Indian Constitution established a secular state. This acts as an impartial, protective umbrella. It means the state has no official religion. Every citizen has the absolute freedom to profess, practice, and propagate any religion they choose, and discrimination based on faith is strictly prohibited. All right, let's dive into our third and final pillar, Section 4, Caste.
This is India's unique system, and we're going to see how it's moving beyond the traditional hierarchy.
Traditionally, this system operated as a very rigid caste hierarchy. Picture a strict ladder-like formation, where every single group is ranked top to bottom, from the highest to the lowest castes. For centuries, this ladder locked in a person's social standing and even their occupation from generation to generation.
But here's where it gets really fascinating. When this ancient hierarchy collides with modern democracy, things shift. Yes, politicians definitely make emotional appeals to caste sentiments to get votes, and they pick candidates based on who lives in a district. But crucially, the fundamental democratic rule of one person, one vote totally flips the script. Suddenly, politicians are forced to pay attention to and actively empower castes that were historically treated as inferior, simply because they desperately need their massive numbers to win elections.
So it's very much a two-way street. Politics actively changes the caste system itself. To survive these ruthless election cycles, those rigid caste groups are forced to adapt. They absorb neighboring subcastes to become bigger, they form strategic alliances with former rivals, and they create massive new voting blocks, often labeled as backward or forward. Democracy literally forces an incredibly inflexible system to bend.
And you have to add in the massive catalysts of modern society, too. The text points to things like rapid urbanization, where populations are migrating from rural villages into densely packed cities, and unprecedented occupational mobility, where new generations are taking up professions totally different from their ancestors. These modern forces are actively shattering those old, rigid ancestral lines faster than ever before.
Okay, let's bring it all together for Section 5, the impact on democracy. This is our final verdict. Based on the source material, identity politics really does operate as the ultimate double-edged sword. On the one hand, it has a very positive impact. It rightfully empowers marginalized communities, finally giving them a voice to successfully demand their fair share of power and resources. But on the flip side, an intense, constant fixation on identity can dangerously divert society's attention away from universal, pressing threats like poverty and corruption, all while continuously risking tension and violence. So, in the complex reality of a diverse society, we are left to ponder a critical contradiction based on all the evidence we've just covered. Is a political focus on our social identities an absolute necessity to achieve true empowerment, or is it a fundamentally dangerous trigger for unending conflict? Finding that balance might just be the ultimate test of any modern democracy. What do you think?